The air was electric as Donald Trump stepped onto the steps of the U.S. Capitol. The world was watching, some were cheering, others protesting, but no one could ignore the moment. As Chief Justice John Roberts raised the Bible, Trump's hand rested firmly on it. I, Donald J. Trump, do solemnly swear. His voice was steady, powerful. Melania stood beside him, a vision of grace in a powder blue coat. Barron, looking slightly nervous, peeked at the sea of people before him. Behind Trump, Mike Pence watched solemnly, knowing that history was being made. But what no one expected was what Trump did immediately after taking the oath. Instead of delivering a traditional inaugural address, he turned directly to the cameras, looked straight into them and said, "America, it's time to get to work. No more excuses." Then he did something no president had ever done before. He pulled out a pen, turned to an aide, and requested a document be brought forward right there on the podium. The crowd gasped. Reporters scrambled. The political establishment froze. What was he doing? The document was an executive order, and as the cameras zoomed in, the bold title became clear. Drain the Swamp, Executive Order Number 1. A ripple of reaction spread through Washington. Some cheered, some jeered, but everyone knew one thing. This presidency was going to be unlike anything they had ever seen before, and it was only minute one of his first day. The motorcade roared through Washington, D.C., escorted by Secret Service and flanked by thousands of onlookers. As the black limousine pulled up to the White House, Donald Trump stepped out, waving confidently before disappearing inside. The doors shut, sealing him within the most powerful office in the world. The Oval Office was pristine, untouched, waiting for its new occupant. Trump took a deep breath and ran his hand over the resolute desk. This was it. No more campaigning, no more debates. It was time for action. His team followed behind him. Steve Bannon, Jared Kushner, Reince Priebus. "All right, gentlemen," Trump said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's get to work." But before anyone could respond, the doors swung open. A senior intelligence official, pale and visibly shaken, entered hastily. "Mr. President, there's something you need to see immediately." Trump raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" The official hesitated before handing over a classified intelligence dossier. It was marked "Eyes Only, President of the United States" in bold red letters. Trump's expression hardened as he flipped through the pages. His face, typically unreadable, showed a flicker of something unusual. Concern. Bannon leaned in. "What the hell is it?" Trump slammed the folder shut. "We're not waiting. Call a press conference. Now." The team exchanged nervous glances. This was not part of the plan. "But sir," Trump cut him off, "the American people deserve the truth, and I'm going to give it to them." With that, he turned and strode out of the Oval Office, leaving his team scrambling behind him. Something was coming, and it was going to change everything. The White House press briefing room was packed. Reporters from every major news outlet were scrambling to set up their cameras and microphones, whispering among themselves. The room buzzed with anticipation. Something was off. The new president had been in office for mere hours, and already an emergency press conference? A hush fell over the room as the doors swung open. Donald Trump strode in, his face unreadable, flanked by his closest advisors. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, the American people deserve the truth. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything." The room tensed. Every journalist in the room clutched their notepads, their fingers hovering over their keyboards, ready to record history. Trump held up the classified dossier he had received just moments earlier. "I was briefed on something today that no one outside the highest levels of government has ever seen. And quite frankly, I don't like it. Not one bit." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. He took a step back, scanning the room. For decades, the American people have been kept in the dark. Decisions have been made behind closed doors, policies put in place that benefit the few at the expense of the many. Well, that ends today. Reporters fired off questions at once. "Mr. President, what are you talking about? Is this about national security? Are you declassifying something?" Trump raised a hand, silencing the chaos. I have instructed my administration to begin the immediate declassification of key documents that will expose corruption, hidden agendas, and the truth about the deep state. The room erupted, gasps, shouts. Some reporters turned to each other in disbelief. This wasn't just another press conference. This was a declaration of war against the establishment. One journalist managed to push through the noise. "Mr. President, are you saying there's been a conspiracy against the American people?" Trump's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Let's just say, things are about to get very interesting." The room exploded with questions, but Trump turned and walked away, leaving the world in the stunned silence. The fallout from Trump's press conference was instant and explosive. News anchors were scrambling to keep up, political analysts were losing their minds, and social media was on fire. Half the country saw him as a hero exposing corruption, while the other half believed he was recklessly destabilizing the government. Inside the White House, tensions ran high. Trump's inner circle was split. "Mr. President, if you go through with this, you'll make enemies at the highest levels. You might even put yourself in danger," one top advisor warned. Trump leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "If they're scared, that means I'm doing something right." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., a storm was brewing. Within hours, multiple high-ranking officials resigned without explanation. Some issued vague statements about needing to spend more time with family, but the timing was too perfect. In the intelligence community, whispers turned into full-blown panic. Government agencies were scrambling to control the narrative, but the public was already demanding answers. That night, protests erupted across the country. Some people rallied in support of Trump's bold move, while others feared what was coming next. The media tried to keep up, but Trump was always one step ahead, because what no one knew was that the first major leak was about to hit the internet. By late afternoon, the political storm was intensifying. Washington, D.C. was in chaos. Protests erupted across the country, some cheering Trump's bold moves, others condemning them. The media was in overdrive, scrambling to cover every new development. Inside the White House, Trump stood at his desk, surrounded by his top advisors, assessing the situation. Tension hung in the air. "This is it," Trump said, his voice firm. He glanced over the documents in front of him, evidence that could change everything. His advisors were divided, some fearing the consequences, while others supported his aggressive stance. But Trump had always been a man of action, and he wasn't going to let this moment slip by. He looked up at his team and declared, "We're not backing down. This is the only way to make real change." The room was silent as his words hit hard, the stakes clear. Minutes later, Trump was addressing the nation live, his voice calm but determined. "The corruption ends now. The arrests are already happening. No one is above the law." His speech was blunt, announcing his next move, an action that would send shockwaves across the nation. The White House staff scrambled as the media buzzed with chaos. Wall Street took a hit, and political leaders worldwide were left scrambling for answers. But Trump's supporters rallied in the streets, firm in their belief that change was finally here. This wasn't just another day in office. It was a declaration of war against the political establishment. The fight had just begun. The nation had never seen chaos like this before. Wall Street was in free fall. Major corporations were scrambling to distance themselves from the exposed corruption, and global markets were in shock. Governments around the world were holding emergency meetings, trying to assess the fallout. But inside the White House, Trump remained calm, composed, and ready for his final move. At exactly 8 p.m., the White House issued a sudden announcement. The president would address the nation. Every major news network, every streaming platform, and millions of Americans prepared for what would undoubtedly be a historic moment. As the cameras switched on, Trump sat behind the resolute desk, his hands folded, his expression serious. "My fellow Americans, the time for lies is over." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I have spent my first 24 hours as your president, exposing what many of you have suspected for years. Our country has been run by a hidden network of elites, corporations, and bureaucrats who do not serve you, the people. But tonight, I will show you the proof." The screen shifted. A classified document filled the screen. At the top, it read, "Top secret, eyes only." The world held its breath. What followed was the biggest reveal in modern history. The documents exposed a secret network of politicians, corporate executives, intelligence officials, and media moguls who had worked together to manipulate elections, stifle investigations, and suppress information from the public. It showed how wars had been started for profit, how economic crises had been engineered to benefit a select few, how politicians on both sides had been pawns in a much larger game. And then came the final bombshell. Trump looked directly into the camera. These are not just names on a paper. As of this moment, arrests are already underway. The nation exploded. News alerts flashed across screens. Helicopters hovered over mansions in Washington, New York, and Silicon Valley. Live footage captured FBI and military units raiding private compounds, seizing computers, and taking powerful people into custody. Some politicians and corporate leaders tried to flee. Private jets were grounded. Bank accounts were frozen. There was nowhere to hide. By midnight, the United States had changed forever. Some called it the greatest purge in American history. Others called it a revolution. Trump leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold on the live news feeds. He had promised to drain the swamp. And on his first day as president, he did exactly that.